Mustafa, can we go ahead?
Yeah, we are live.
All right. Okay, so hello everyone. Good evening to all of you. Uh, welcome all of you again to our Fourth World Second International Webinar. And this time we have come up with a very interesting topic: performance, pandemic, and politics. So we will listen to our two of the very distinguished speaker here. We have Sylvia Jastrovic, ma'am, from UK, University of Warwick, and we have with us Sarmishta Shaha from IIT Bombay. So, Sarmishta Shah is assistant professor in the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Bombay. And so, with that very brief note, I welcome you all to this international webinar. And it's over to you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sarmishta. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shubhankar. I am very happy to welcome all of you here this evening. Sylvia is with us. I think it's afternoon sometime in the UK right now as we speak. Sylvia, like Shubhankar said, is a professor of the School of Theatre and Performance Studies in University of Warwick, UK. She was a lecturer earlier at York University in Toronto, and she has published widely on the stage, performance and politics, and also radio plays, for example. We'll listen to her about that as well today, hopefully. And recently her book, Performances of Authorial Presence and Absence, The Author Dies Hard, was published by Palgrave. It is a very recent publication, 2020 it came out. So I think over to you, Sylvia, we'll take forward the conversation after your brief presentation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to talk to you. I have prepared a little bit of a presentation to get us going and to kind of open some, make some reflections and perhaps open some questions about performance and politics and pandemic, looking to some extent into the UK context, but we can open it up to wherever it takes us. So I'll take I don't know a little bit of time to do that, and then we can take it from here. About performance. Okay, so I will do I have a PowerPoint which I'm going to share. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, this is not where I want it to be. Okay, so we have our title here, Performance, Politics and the Pandemic. And this is not something I'm going to talk about in detail, but it is Stratford-upon-Avon and the building of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And it's relatively close to Warwick University and close to where I live. So sometimes I go there for a walk. The Royal Shakespeare Company is now closed. And I've just taken a walk yesterday there. Fewer people than we can see in this picture, but still not deserted anymore. The theater is closed, and I always like to come by, look around it, because they have this these posters in front of it of what is going to happen when. And this show, the Magician's Elephant, was supposed to, I think, be their Christmas show for this season, for this year, and it was supposed to start in October 2020 and go until March 2021, I think. I have a little bit of weakness for their Christmas shows. So I looked at it, and of course it's cancelled. It's not going to happen this year, but it says you can already buy the tickets. It starts in October. It will premiere in October 2021 and go until March 2022. So anyway, I thought it was sort of bittersweet. It was a little bit sad that the doors are shut. No performances in the theater. They've gone digital to some extent, but on the other hand, yes, they will reopen, and that gave a little bit of optimism to us. Anyway, what I want to explore today is really this condition of theater that is here and now. We always think, okay, what distinguishes theater from other forms of art, or most of other forms of art, is this here and now moment. And I'm wondering what's happening to this here and now moment, and what can theater do if this here and now moment is delayed or asynchronous, or what happens to its aesthetics and what happens to its politics. So hence this subtitle that I've given, Aesthetics and Politics of Here and Now. So I'd like to bring in a few examples of this here and now, and how these new conditions have changed what it is to be here and now in theater. And I start with lockdown viewings. I don't know if how popular these various streamings from various theater companies were in India during the lockdown. Here among my colleagues and among my friends, they were to some extent very popular. At least a lot was available. So I just put a few random photos here. These are some fabulous Russian three sisters that are all done in sign language. It's a very interesting performance. Underneath is Romeo Castellucci's version of the Mozart's Magic Flute, and the one at the far right corner is the Uncanny Valley by Rimini Protocol that I want to play a little bit. I want to give you a little bit of that. So for me, these streamings were interesting because at first it seems, we are, all this has become available. We can see these things that we haven't had a chance to see. There were things from Berlin Ensemble, from the Schaubühne, from Russia, some fantastic new directors, a lot of shows from the UK, the National Theatre who was doing their streamings, and so on and so forth. I even have a group of friends that we used to meet online because we are scattered around the world, and we would watch every week, a few of these and then discuss. But soon, our meetings turn out to be about everything else, and then touching a little bit of these shows that some of us sometimes manage to see, other times don't. In other words, the enthusiasm for watching theater online started to fade. And what I started to feel was this incredible frustration, because you imagine this happening live, and then you see some kind of live audience, and yet you are so remote. You're kind of as if you're watching a party from afar, but you're not invited to the party or something like that. So it was a little bit, it started to become frustrating, and up to the point when I thought, I need a break. I cannot watch another theater streaming for a while. The one show that, in my view, worked the best is The Uncanny Valley by Rimini Protocol. I don't know if you know the show, but before I say anything else about it, I will try to play a very short excerpt from it. And then you might see even why this worked and the others didn't. Sorry, share screen, okay. It's not that one. Sorry, this is the wrong one. Just give me a second to sort out what I'm sharing.
Yeah, sure. Please take your time.
This is the other one, and not the one that I actually. Oh, here it is. Here is the one I wanted to share. So just a minute or two to give you a sense. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
Not the video though. Yeah, now we can. Yeah.
Now yeah. I might actually skip a little bit because, yeah.
Welcome. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you've come here to listen to my lecture on the problem of instability and, as I call it, overcoming the obstacle of the uncanny valley. I'll discuss this subject by looking at two biographies, that of the computer scientist Alan Turing and my own. First, a few words about myself. My name is Thomas Melle, I'm from Germany, but I try to do this in English. And here, picture please, is a photo of me as a child. Oh, cute, no? Well, acting cute in some way. It was taken when I was 6 years old, 1981. I came from a pretty limited background, and a gap in the horizon opened and my perspective broadened. On the whole, I liked going to school, so I don't know why I'm looking into the camera like this, pretending to be sad like this. Maybe we are already actors of ourselves at the age of 6. I'm somehow...
Okay, so I think this is enough to give us a flavor, and I suppose you do notice very quickly that that the actor is alive and not alive, that it's the robot is based on the real person, looks very real, but also looks uncanny. He's really this uncanny body, uncanny presence on stage. And I found the show very thought-provoking for various reasons, including the question of liveness. What does it mean to be live? What does it mean for theater to be live? What is the relationship between body and object on stage? What does body in performance mean? And so on and so forth. I think is a live body tentative on stage? Is there a higher flexibility between body and object on stage? Does the performance need to be live? The audience certainly of this show, where this recording was taken, was live. It was before we needed to socially distance in theaters and other places. So it was a regular live audience, but the performer was actually not alive. And I wondered, do we need this? Do we need to be live from both sides? And is live audience enough? So to me, this show was interesting because I felt we don't always have to be live in the moment. Some of us could be somewhere else. Some of us could be delayed. Some of us could be delegated, as this performer has in a sense delegated the persona of the robot puppet, however we want to consider that body on stage. And that was one of the very few shows that actually I thought it's fine to see online. It's fine to see in 3D, because not everything two-dimensional, sorry, but because not everybody was sharing the same space, actually, even though we had the illusion of it. There are many other questions that it brings, but the most interesting question for me in relation to the situation we are in was this question of if the audience is live, maybe do the performers have to be live as well? But then there is another moment came in that made me think, and I will go back to my PowerPoint. I hope if I can find it. Here it is. Yes. Yeah. You can see it now? Yeah, it's there. Yeah. So. So then there was another interesting moment in our past the lockdown experience. The recent proms, these proms are an annual event sponsored by BBC in the UK, and it's like a big music festival that brings in the most famous names, musicians in the music world, orchestras, soloists, and there is usually a prominent conductor who conducts these proms. Now, speaking of politics, this year, this event was highly political, more political than usual, because there has been a big dispute whether the tune Rule Britannia was to be performed or not, because some deemed it to be nationalistic, some deemed it to really kind of start, even though it has been always performed at the end of the proms, at the final evening of the proms, because this is an event that takes over several days. And even though this has been performed every time at the closing of the proms, with the audience singing along or whatever, joining in, the question was whether this particular tune, Rule Britannia, is really echoing a Brexiteer sentiment too much, and the nationalistic sentiment too much. At the end, it had that this was performed, but and the opinions remain divided. However, the notion, and also it brings up the question of community, audience as a community, but also what kind of community is brought together. Is there a sense of togetherness, and what kind of togetherness? What is the ideology of this togetherness? Now, what is also interesting is how it has been done in the circumstances of pandemic. Now, what you can see here, the auditorium was empty. And what you see in the picture above are the singers from a choir that were there to sing a particular melody. The orchestra was somewhere, it's out of the shot, but it's there. So you have the live orchestra, but performing to an empty audience. And at one point, performers, singers, getting into the auditorium to perform something from there. Now, the event did have the audience, and you could watch it on TV. There were audiences outside watching it projected on a screen, but also there were these mass audiences on Zoom. And you can see in the bottom picture, these are actually the little Zoom windows, and people watching from their Zoom windows this event. So as the performers were performing, for most of the time, these windows were projected. So there was this illusion of the audience, or this audience that was there and not there in a way. And I thought it's really interesting because, you know, the performance was interesting in a sense that also everybody, or the performers had to be socially distanced a bit, so you didn't get the full bodied sound of the orchestra that sometimes you get in the normal circumstances. It echoed differently through the empty auditorium. It was all performed masterfully, but it was also strange. It didn't have this sense of fullness. The audience was cheering and enjoying the event from Zoom. So for me, this brought some interesting questions, and almost in contrast or complementary to the Uncanny Valley example, because here you have the live performers, but the audience is virtual. The audience is really online. The audience is something, you know. While in the first one, you know, there is the audience shares the same space, but the performance is elsewhere. Here, the performers share the same space, but the audience is dispersed. And I was wondering again about this category of here and now. How is, you know, where is, I said, where is now and when is here? And also wondering in a sense, when are we really, when in these circumstances, when does the here and now happen? And even if we can say that we are in different places at the same time in this situation, and we are in which we are now conversing through Zoom or performing through Zoom, we can also say that there is this little fraction of a second delay between us, time delay, which we are not aware of. It doesn't, unless there is a glitch or we freeze, then we are, but otherwise. So it's neither here nor now, but we are still together. So I'm interested what happens there and what are the possibilities of that. However, this has brought up a controversial political dimension to the situation, this particular event. I'm further interested in what kind of contents, what kind of, can we just assume these new circumstances and do our things the same way? Can we use the same dramaturgies, or do we need to think about different themes, different dramaturgies, and so forth? So I want to bring in a couple of or a few more examples. So while UK theaters at the moment, most of them are still shut. Very few might reopen in October, but that's also uncertain. Donmar Warehouse was among the first one to actually offer a performance to live audience in June 2020, and they just ended at the end of August. And this was the adaptation of the novel by José Saramago, the Portuguese Nobel Prize winner, adapted by a really well-known, really prominent sort of British playwright Simon Stevens of a sort of youngish generation. Yeah, not so young anymore, but a new one of the more recent play, and he's a very well regarded and really excellent playwright. So Blindness was basically, they called it a socially distanced installation. And most of it, you mentioned, Sarmish, that we might want to talk about radio plays as well later. So this might be an interesting, it's not a radio play, but it's very oral, yeah? So in this picture, I don't know how good the pictures are, but well, both at the bottom picture and at the picture up there in the left corner, you see the audience and you see how dispersed they are in a way, and they're all wearing masks, and most of this installation, which performance, is taking place in darkness with some light effects, and and the content of the novel Blindness is about an epidemic. It's obviously some sort of a political metaphor, but the driving force of the novel is a pandemic where people are going blind. And it turns out that the only person who is not blind yet is a woman who is leading a group of blind people to an asylum where they're going to be taken away from others. But actually everybody around her is getting blind. And she is narrating for us the chaos, the violence, the savagery that but also solidarity that's starting to happen as people are panicking, feeling vulnerable, losing sight. So you have a bus driver stopping in the middle of the street because he can no longer see. You have a politician giving some kind of press conference. Again, something strange is happening. He can no longer see. So it's this epidemic where everybody becomes afflicted except this one woman who bears witness in a way to it and tells us the story. So it's a very disconcerting, very unnerving tale, if you wish. The way this was done, again, in terms of time and space, is interesting. It was all narrated by the English actress Juliet Stevenson, again, somebody quite established, quite well-known theater actress, by using, and you might see it in the right corner, the thing she's holding. This is basically the audio equipment. It's the binaural technology. So what it does is, because the audience has their masks because of the pandemic and their earphones, so we are all kind of, and we are in the darkness, so we are all a little bit muted, blinded, and so on. And this voice comes through our earphones. But what this technology does is that it changes the proximity from which this voice comes. So sometimes you feel that she's whispering into your ear. You feel that she's next to you. You feel you could touch her almost in the darkness. The other time you have a sense that she has run at the other side of the room, shouting, trying to reach you with her voice from there. So I find it interesting because of its topic. So it's a topic that kind of again looks for analogy. So there is the epidemic is this immediate analogy, but also when I think about it as theater, because it's described as a socially distant installation, but it's also, the audience is also part of the installation. We could be the passengers of this sort of journey of the blind to somewhere. in both metaphorical and literal ways. And again, it's this question of here and now, or what we understand as here. If we think of that voice, where is this voice? When we think it's here, but maybe it's not here. So how is this, how are these technologies of our communications, of making theater, creating potentially new understanding of what here and now is? Now, I don't want to take too much. Uh, so that's another. This is something we haven't seen yet because it's not on yet. But I want to bring this up again when it comes to content, and what are the plans? What are the kind of contents? What are the kind of shows to put on stage? So this is from the National, and it's about two shows that are going to. I think the only two shows that are going to open in October, all being well. It might not be well. We may not be able to reopen. But so one is Christmas pantomime. Dick Whittington. So Christmas pantomime, you probably know, is a very popular, well, I didn't know much about it until I came to England, to be honest, but it's this very popular, entertaining, popular theater form that usually takes place around Christmas time. It's very parodic, it's very playful, there is lots of sing and dance, there is cross-dressing, there is a villain, there is audience participation who shouts, look, he's behind you, careful, and stuff like that. So, and usually they do adaptations of fairy tales, popular tales, and things like that. So there is in the right corner, I don't know what's left, what's right for me and you, but anyway, where you see the person dressed up as a mouse or cat, I'm not sure anymore. This is from an old production of Dick Whittington. So it's usually very communal. The auditorium is usually packed. People are getting up to shout, sing. Often somebody always actually, they get somebody out from the auditorium to put on stage. This brings a lot of laughs. So it's very, very together. And now I'm really curious, how is this going to look like? How is this atmosphere of pantomime going to be recreated in a space like this, in the grayish photo? Because they have reconfigured one of its spaces so that it's going to happen in a round, so that it can accommodate around 500 people at once, but in a socially distanced way. So how is this going to work? It's really interesting. How is the energy of this performance going to translate? And why, and also the National Theatre is not well known. I mean, this is, I think, only their second pantomime they're putting on ever. So they're not that kind of theater. So it was interesting to think why this pantomime. And it almost seems as if there is a tendency to kind of offer something nurturing, healing, the audience, give to the audience the ability to forget the moment they're in, and some kind of togetherness and solidarity. So it seems, because this is a form where everybody comes together, young and old, and and it's beloved by various social strata. So maybe it's that social gesture really of recreating community through theater. Maybe we'll see how it's going to play out. The other thing they're putting on is something far more politically critical, and it's the sequel to the performance, one-person show, The Death of England, and this one is going to be the Death of England, Delroy. So this is the sequel. It's written by Clint Dyer and Roy Williams, another well-known English playwright, and it was premiered earlier in 2020 before the pandemic, and it was very, very popular, and it really explored national identity through football, and it tackled a lot of really burning and critical issues. Now it's going to look, it's again a one-person show, and it's going to explore how this main character is asking, how British am I as a Black man? So it's in the context of Black Lives Matter, in the context of reflecting and reckoning with Britain's own role in slave trade, in colonial conquest, and all of these things that are coming, that they should have been dealt with long ago, but they have now I think taken more serious, more radical dimensions. And I think this is again a reflection on that, and also with Windrush, and and there are a lot of issues, as if you probably know, a lot of issues that not only Black Lives Matter, but a lot of very particular injustices, very particular to England as well, not only the global aspect of it. So I thought it's interesting when we think about the political content and how potentially a form of entertainment or popular culture has been put in a repertoire to bring a certain dimension, communal dimension, and then how another communal dimension hopefully will be explored through this. This is obviously a one-person show, a monologue that is, as the title might suggest, far more critical. And I want to give one last example, and then hopefully we'll get. And this example is not from the UK. It's from the US, and it's the theater called Theater of War Productions. They started in 2009, I think, and they're only doing Greek tragedies, but Greek tragedies as analogous to various situations, societal and political situations. So they started with, for instance, Sophocles' Ajax, which is about a soldier coming back from war. They performed it to soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan. Then they did another one called Antigone in Ferguson, which was about a shooting of a black youth in Ferguson who was left on the streets for 4 hours before he was taken to the morgue. So they kind of link things to the choice of the tragedy. They link to a topical issue in a specific environment, and also invite the audience from this environment. So they would do things in prisons. They would do this one about the Antigone one was done in the high school of this young man who was killed. And so on. And now they have done their first pandemic play, first Zoom performance, is Sophocles' Oedipus the King. Now again, another choice that on some level seems obvious, because you have the plague there, and the plague was, the plague is ravaging the city. Oedipus is told that to save the city, he have to find the killer of the former king. Who happens to be his father, as we will learn in the end. So we have read, I think, Oedipus through various lenses, through the incestuous lens, to the lens of saving the city, to the lens of tragic heroes, flaws, whatever. But the plague was there very often, in at least in my reading, as some kind of vehicle. But it's much more than a vehicle, especially as if we go back into its original context to learn that at the time Sophocles was writing this, Athens was riddled with plague, and it was around 430 BC when the plague started, and Athens was in the middle of the Peloponnesian Wars. It was under the siege from Sparta, and a lot of rural population was instructed by the Athenian ruler Pericles to come into the city for protection. But of course, that created overcrowding. There was poor sanitation, not adequate housing, and this is how the epidemic started. And Pericles, the ruler on which Oedipus is modeled to some degree, also perished in that plague with his two sons. And Thucydides, the historian who chronicled it, was ill, but luckily survived the plague, and that's why we have the document of it. So it's very interesting that how that this works obviously on the level of the topic, but also asking about political roles, decisions, and things like that. I want to play a trailer for it and just say a few more words about it as we go. Let me just get to my. Okay, here it is, I think. Oh, no, it's not that one. Sorry. Share screen. There we go. All right, we can all see it.
are people suffering out there, dying from the hateful plague. And this is what you choose to do with your time?
Look, and you will see a storm-battered city, drowning in an ocean of blood, no longer able to keep her head above the cresting waves. A savage pestilence has ravaged the land.
Can't you see I am standing here sick with worry? That should be enough to stop you.
Why should you be worried? Even if I am shown to be the son of a slave, going back 3 generations, it will never taint your birth.
Even so,
or the
I'm
color
asking
of
you
your
to do
blood.
as I say. Please be done with it.
There is nothing you could say that would stop me from uncovering the truth.
This is because you are not listening to what I'm trying to say. I'm only thinking of you.
That much is true, but you know nothing of the truth, since you are blind in your ears, blind in your eyes, blind in your mind.
How sad. All of these insulting words will soon be spoken about you by your own people.
It's all a scam.
The plague, where do you start? You know, there's so many parallels. Whereas the doctor's getting them in the hospital, I'm going into their homes. And you see a life full. And then you see them as their life is leaving them. It's a blessing to bear witness sometimes, to be there. If nothing else, if I can't save them, at least I'm there to bear witness. But now I appear as an apparition. You know, I'm covered in a mask, and all they see is the eyes. Everything else is covered, and it almost looks like a ghost. And it takes away the humanity of it. I have to keep a distance from these people. And the humanity of touch, of even in the play, at the end, there was one person who was still Oedipus. Why did you do this? I don't want to think of Oedipus as a sympathetic character, but he is.
I am stained, polluted, profaned. I am filthy. I am a virus, a deadly infection spreading. I am wretched. I have cursed myself, it seems, without knowing.
But if you are who he says you are, know that you were born to suffer more than any man before or after.
Oh God, it stings, the place where the pins went in.
Where did you find the strength to cut yourself off from the light, ripping out your own eyes? What vicious God took hold of you and forced you to do it?
Does anyone hear my voice? Or is it lost in the wind?
Okay, that's so that was the theater of war. And again, what I found really interesting about this is that it turns out that this performance had 15,000 Zoom viewers. That's about the amount of people that would be that the Dionysian theater in Athens.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Wednesday,
Oh,
6:30
sorry.
p.m. It's already June 10th.
Okay, sorry. The thing was going on its own volition. So that accommodated 15,000 Zoom viewers, which is about roughly the same amount of viewers that the Dionysius theater could accommodate in Athens, in ancient Athens, and the theaters during the plague in Athens were not closed. People were allowed to go. There was no social distancing, apparently. Why? Because the Greeks believed in the healing power of theater. So I think there was something linked between, not only ritual, but also the healing power of theater and this notion of catharsis, which is mysterious, and we're not always quite sure what it means. And even if we don't believe in the healing power of theater in the same way, in the same medical way, in the scientific way they did, is there some healing power there? The other question also, if the audience of 1500 can be accommodated through this means, what about dramaturgies? The Greeks had the masks and the shoes, coturnas, to enable to project in this vast space. It's like performing in a something that's bigger than a football field, right, or about that size. Now we are in something. These actors are reading from their rooms, from their homes, from their and what they have available is the voice, a few gesture, maybe a few little makeup or props. So how do you adjust the performance? How do you adjust dramaturgies? And again, this sort of healing thing. So there's a really nice essay by Elif Batuman about this performance called "Can Greek Tragedy Get Us Through the Pandemic" in the New Yorker, and she writes tragic theater and democracy arouse around the same time in Athens. Homegrown literary vehicle allowed its citizens to think through how to run their democracy. It's a tempting theory, she says. So I like to leave us with that theory and maybe a few questions that I can put here, or I don't even have to. Anyway, let's. Okay, so just to kind of sum up these limits and possibilities of here and now in the pandemic, there is the economic issue, which we, which is there, and it's, it consists of the question. The main question is the question of survival of theater institutions, of theater makers, freelancers. Also, the question of access, which was always there in different ways when it comes to theater. How to make theater in a socially distant circumstances, the aesthetics of it, the logistic of staging, the logistic of reaching out to communities. Does it require new dramaturgies? What do we do with these new empty spaces between seats, between auditorium and actors? And then there is the political thing. So if assembly is based on here and now, what is there something in the here and now, in that presence, being present in the moment, that gives potential for an assembly or for some sort of political sort of experience or resistance? Can it be replicated, and in what way, if we are not really here and now? So I stop here. I might have gone a bit over time, so I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all absolutely all right. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for this wonderful talk. I have a few questions, and I think I'll start with my own. As you presented, I was thinking through several issues and thinking through them in the light of what's happening in India right now. Actually, as a kind of research to our conversation today, I was going through some of the lectures that you have given during the pandemic. Some of the other lectures that you have been giving. So in a past lecture, you were talking about, the pandemic. So you quoted Arundhati Roy, and you went on to talk about the pandemic as the portal, the doorway of possibilities. She uses more in the light of a metaphor, right? What it opens up, etc. In this presentation, what I see, I mean, if I could quickly summarize what I see is that if there is a portal, which has led to different kinds of possibilities, and you have primarily looked at it from the perspective of the here and now, where you've looked at the spatiality of time and the temporality of space. Okay, so where is now and when is here is the big questions that around which you are looking at this entry point, this portal of possibilities, right? So you talk about with blindness, with the first example that you gave, you spoke about with the first example you gave, you kind of spoke about the politics and aesthetics of the here and now, with Royal Shakespeare Company having kind of postponed, and you open up there, and then you talk about with Rimini Protocol's performance, you speak about the deferral or the disembodied or uncanniness of the actor who's not there. So as if we have often in performance studies spoken about the disembodiment of the figure of the actor insofar as performance is concerned. So you have, as if in digital performances, we are delegating it to something else, someone else. Then later on, you go on to talking about further matters of dramaturgy. You bring about the question of nationalism, for example, which is a big thing in India today. I mean, to prove who is the Indian, basically to fall within the category of the Indian is something we are constantly having to do. So that fits very well to our understanding in India today. At the same time, you talk about the role of technology in thinking about the here and now. And thereon, you move on to, talking about the socially distanced way of communal being. So the space, when you speak about the nationals Christmas pantomimes, so when you socially distance and sit somewhere, and then performances would be done. And then of course you bring up about the question of national about British identity with the performance of the Death of England, for example. So what does it mean to be British as such? Can a black man be British, so to speak? And then finally, you bring about a very interesting example from Greek tragedy, where you think about the healing power of theater. Okay, now you do mention it in the questions that you've posed, which is the economic concern. Okay, I'm sorry, this is a longish question, but I think I'll just do it anyway. Now the thing is that I found out during a prior research, because I'm also looking at how big this industry is. Can we think about the arts as industry and the artist as a worker? Okay, because ultimately professional artists actually survive on this. Even in India, it is a different matter that many a times a number of professional artists are simultaneously juggling between two jobs, but that doesn't make them any less of a worker. So in a 2016 FICCI report, FICCI is Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, 2016, it says that the performing arts industry in India is 275 billion Indian rupees big. Okay, and they were projecting it for 2018. Okay, that it is going to become that big, which is about roughly 3.73 billion US dollars, that big an industry. And recently in the UK, so our government during the pandemic did not declare any kind of help to the artists here. I mean, it has announced several packages, but there were no packages for artists whatsoever. However, in the UK, it has been a different situation from what we see. The government had announced 1.57 billion pounds, which I think roughly amounts to 2 billion or more than 2 billion USD as help. Right. Until now, I think it's Kerala government which had announced some monetary help to folk artists, that too like 1,000 rupees for folk artists, a few who are registered with the government. So I would like you to kind of also draw our attention a little bit apart from the dramaturgy that you go on to talk about. How has, in the economics of things, has the pandemic affected the artist, quote unquote, worker? And how does that affect finally the dramaturgy of, theater? Yeah. Sorry about that very long.
No, thank you. This is very nice and very useful, because it kind of connects different contexts, basically, very well. Yes, this package was, has been promised, which is a good thing. I think at the start of the pandemic, a lot of we heard mostly in the newspaper, and mostly from people who are running or working at this very high-end institution. So we heard from Rufus Norris, the director of the National Theatre, for example. We heard from, and even these people were in a lot of panic, because these are big institutions that need a lot of money. Some of them, I might give an imprecise now recalling, but it was, I think, maybe $1 million a month at least, if not even a week, that they need to run the show. So it's a lot of money that is needed. So even the money that is promised, which is a lot of money, I think once you break it down to these various institutions, it's not that much. Then there is all this thing that now we have to do it with social. The capacities are smaller, so venues like National or places like another kind of cultural places like Tate Modern, which is reopened, and so they might still reopen with, and some have reopened with this reduced capacity. Also, remodeling the spaces to fit this costs a lot of money. So the costs are huge there. We mostly hear about big companies, and these are big, important companies. These are important venues like the National, the Royal Court, or often they are outlets for new voices. They're outlets for this communal spirit of theater. But we don't hear enough from small companies, and I don't know what happens to the freelance workers,
right?
in theater. And in especially with freelance, some wouldn't be, you have to be employed, for instance, to be eligible for something that's ending now, but there was this furlough scheme, so that if you're unable to work, you're still getting um, 80%, I think it was, from the government. And now this is ending, and there is some kind of new scheme that's introduced, which I'm not sure if I fully understand, but I think it will be hugely problematic. There are a lot of people who will fall into some kind of gray zone, which wouldn't really cover it. So, the freelancers are a completely precarious situation. And this precarious situation continues.
Right.
I think theater will recover,
Right.
but there will be a price to pay for this recovery. I think we are going to lose some smaller companies. I think we might lose some more alternative sort of spaces and venues, and I think some makers will have to make do with other jobs before they can return. So I think it's not. How to put it? It's great. I mean, in India is zero. In Serbia, where I'm originally from, zero support for culture. So this is something that sounds like, and it is in a way, a hefty budget. So it's better than zero, for sure. I mean, much better. But it's not solving the situation. It's not really providing a cushion for everyone.
Right, right. So you go on to talk about how in a digital performance, especially with the last one, that there were 15,000 people watching. Okay. So somehow the dynamics of how the economics of performance is also changing over time. So how do you see that changing the dramaturgy of performances as such? The fact that you can earn out of that
Yeah.
huge audience member who can come and watch a performance online.
I mean, now these events for once, we have these events now that charge. They don't charge as much money as when you go to, but they do charge. So if you can, so that might be a way to make some extra money. So I'm thinking of the financial thing, but in terms of dramaturgical thing aspect, I think it's still sort of early days. But yes, of course, on the one hand, it's limiting. On the other hand, uh, uh, limitations can be interesting to work with.
Right.
Interesting things can come out of it. So this adaptation of blindness, which they call performance, socially distanced installation, I think it's an interesting thing. You could do this relatively safely, right, for everyone. The live streaming of shows, or not live streaming, but this sort of Zoom performances, right? They are interesting. I think they are limited. I don't know how much how much room there is to build on. Maybe there is. Maybe we still have to. We have to. But I don't know how. How to put it? How many different dramaturgical directorial versions can you do of this Oedipus than this one? Is it more on the actor and the actor's delivery? How the actor will then use their faculties to interpret this character in their own way? But we cannot talk about different concepts of set and staging, or maybe we can. I don't know. But for now, we are getting these very rudimentary things. But what I'm thinking about, actually, I got to right at hand. Actually, I got to review this book called Nomadic Theater by Lisbeth Groot Nibeling, and I haven't written my review yet, which I will. But it was very interesting. I got it to review during lockdown. And the book, the whole book is about mobility and dramaturgy of mobility, and it's written, of course, pre-pandemic times, but actually, what it describes are a lot of dramaturgies that include performances for one person, one facilitator or actor, one person. Then a lot of things where you have some forms of audio walk. And as I was reading this in the lockdown, I thought, gosh, these are not. I mean, mobility has been a big sort of aspect of it, but of this book. But actually, I'm thinking even in our reduced mobility, the forms, dramaturgical forms that have been described here, could be something to think about.
Right. Also, in this context, can you throw some light on radio plays, the dramaturgy of radio plays, and what possibilities it may have, or it already have you seen any examples of how radio plays are picking up, or maybe changing aesthetics of radio plays? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? because students here where we are right now at IIT, they are actually working towards creating radio plays at the moment. So your views would be very useful.
Yeah. Yes. No, well, I think radio plays have always, I think, required to some extent a bit less than actually you can produce more, right? And in a and you can and they can be quite playful actually.
Right.
Here, the BBC Radio 4, for example, that they're producing a lot, and they've always been producing a lot of radio plays. I don't think I'm not sure to which extent have the dramaturgies changed, and to be honest, the range of work, they produce a big range of work. So sometimes some of it can be quite old-fashioned, and you think, oh well, this is a radio play. Use the medium, play with it a bit more. Don't just tell me a story, or don't just give me two people in a room talking. Give me some more. Two pieces that can be really experimental and very interesting, and then elsewhere, like not necessarily BBC, but elsewhere, you can. What's nice when I was writing radio plays more, and when I teach radio plays to students, um, uh, what's really nice is that you count on what you can hear. And this is very different, and then that your kind of co-fabulator, your audience, is making these visual images in their mind's eye.
Right.
So whereas when we talk about stage plays or even film, we say, you don't have to say all this, they will see it. You don't have to, the character doesn't have to really tell us, but here you can convey a lot through sound, and also it gives you a lot of flexibility. Like you can be outdoors, indoors, you can be on a beach, you can be I don't know, at a rock concert, you can be, there is a lot you can there is a telling that's going on through sound, and this sound doesn't always have to be language. And I think this is the wonderful possibility of radio. And I think now in these times, yes, it might be the time when we are going to see some kind of renaissance of radio. It's always been there. It's always had its magic. But, we rarely talk about radio plays, right? I don't know what is the production of radio plays in India, how much, of it is produced. They are sort of cheaper to produce than stage plays. And I think we might be seeing more hybrid forms, more forms like this.
Blindness, I think.
Like this blindness. And also before the pandemic, and it wasn't sort of a pandemic play, but Simon McBurney from Theatre de Complicité.
It became extremely famous amongst people in India. We were watching it everywhere.
Isn't it wonderful? I just thought it was, I was blown away. But it's, again, using these binaural techniques, technology. And but what's the point of it was with this one with Simon McBurney, it's not about the technology. You forget, you're not really seduced by the wizardry of it. It's what he does with, you are in the darkness, and what he does, it's through sound. And I think there is something very interesting, some shift of perception that happens, whether you are listening or whether you're watching. And I always remember after 9/11, sometimes after 9/11, they produced this omnibus film called 9/11, I think. And one of the short films within the film, was by Inaritu. And I will always remember he just used the documentary footage of the Twin Towers and people falling from the towers. And in one scene, we have just the image, no sound. And in the other scene, we are in the darkness in theater, and we only hear the sound. And what it did, it was extremely, this became, these images became so widely circulated by then that, we know them, they're horrible, but at the same time, we were used to them. And what it did, the separation of image and sound, we were able to see it again. So I'm just thinking, when writing for radio, might be worth thinking, how what we see, we can see or think of differently if we hear it. A situation, an issue, and even an image. What if we, what happens when we hear an image? How, is our perception different? Do we learn more about it? Do we dig deeper? So I think it's I think radio is a magical medium, and I think there is a lot we can do because the confabulation is different. We have to count on the imagination, the visual imagination of the listener as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
if this
Huh?
I don't know if this would be useful for, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, this also takes us to the question of, delegating, delegating, as it were, the actor delegating himself or herself to another body. So it seems like with the internet, what you can do is not only delegate the characters to the image, but also do a lot with the development of technology insofar as delegating is concerned. With bioral technology, you can actually create experiences in a way that one has never really thought about earlier with the development of technology. But what we'll do is quickly take in a few questions. There are quite a few questions here. So Pooja Ghosh asks, what happens to notion of the public in relation to politics in these digital performances? Does the efficacy of the performance diminish? For instance, how does pantomime work without an audience interaction? Yeah.
Thank you, Pooja, and hi to Pooja, who I know. Yes, that's a really good question, and it is actually a question I'm sort of grappling with. So one part of this question is the notion of the public, and I think it is in that notion of the public, in that notion of being here and now, in that sort of spontaneous community, to echo Turner, that takes place when we are watching a performance together. When this togetherness, it has its own magic, has its own energy. So part of the question for me is, and I think this is also where the political comes in. It's this affect as well. It's not just the content, or it's not just how we play with the forms to get forward a more radical content or a more provocative content, but it's also this affect, this sort of, the emotional aspect, which I don't think we should be undermined. Either way. So for me, this question, if we are not in the same place and time in some ways, is this potential diminished? So I'm basically answering with a question, I suppose, rather than a fully formed answer. But so my fear in part is that then it might become a little bit like social media, which when it first appeared, we could see, and I mean, still sometimes does that, but if somewhere, there is censorship through social media, we could get actually the information of what happened. It became almost a vehicle of mobilizing in some places. But now I think it feels more like a place where of all sorts of great cacophony, but in the political sense of people sort of venting things out with their likes and dislikes, and then they actually don't really physically do anything. So I'm just a bit worried if we are not in the same space, although not that we would be in a theater and see a show and then we go out to protest immediately and change the world. It's not working like that. So part of my fear is, will it water down this political edge? On the other hand, I'm also thinking, well, maybe it's not going to be, theater will be back, but the pandemic will go. It might be difficult. There might be a lot. It is difficult already. The victim, the sacrifices are huge, but it will not be forever. It never stayed forever, and it will not now. But for now, what are we going to be too much on our knees when it ends as culture workers to do anything productive? So this is part of my fear. On the other hand, I'm thinking maybe there is a potential. We've been doing these sort of things, communicating across the globe. Maybe this is the healing power of it. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be in the same sort of conditions of here and now. Maybe the healing power is in a way we re-energize one another, or we provoke one another. And whether we are in the same space or whether we are looking at each other through screens, maybe it doesn't matter if 15,000 people logged in, zoomed in to listen or view this production. That's remarkable, So that is a potentially powerful vehicle. You will not get 15,000 people at once in a theater ever. So I'm thinking that there are, I think this is relatively new to us, because I mean, it was available to us for a while, but you know, it's relatively new as a, you know, as an option when other options are limited. So I think there is a potential there. With the panto, I don't know. It would be worth seeing. It would be interesting how it plays out, because how will this energy be? Because with the pantomime or with these forms of entertainment, there is something about the energy in the room, right? And the togetherness. So these people will be together, but you know, there will be a lot of empty seats in between, or empty spaces, if not seats. So how is this sort of dealt with? I suppose a lot of it will be built in through jokes, and I think it will be addressed. So that remains to be seen. But yes, I don't know. I think it's a good question, and I think it has its potential. You know, these things. It's not that we are doomed, but on the other hand, I wouldn't be overly optimistic. So I don't know. If it's not a great answer, it's more like a question to a question.
Yeah, I think we are still grappling through this, and you know, that's what possibly we are doing. There's an interesting question which is almost related to the previous question. So Angeline Premkumar, she asks that does not the whole idea of online performance or digital performance make the whole form elitist and take away the egalitarian character of theater, especially in the context of a country like India? I think somewhere you also spoke about solidarity of privilege. So would you like to comment on that?
Yes, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, yes, it's limited, because you know, with theater, but at least if you look at like a 20th century, 21st century, this question of access, who can access it, for whom is it, who is the audience, how you make it accessible, I mean, has been a big question, right? And you know, I've seen before the pandemic, you know, there've been, you know, interesting performances or not so interesting performances, or you know, on various social issues. For example, Ariana Mnuchin's Caravanserai, which is about exile or immigration. And yet this is a performance that used to go, a very expensive performance, touring on the most expensive festival. So the ticket for this would be, I don't know, £100 or £50 or something. So who is it for? Is it for the bourgeois audience to get educated about the less fortunate, or is it really a dialogue with somebody? You know, so sometimes the way this works, I mean, it's a part of this whole theater business has become a very bourgeois form. Right. And but then I think the entire time you have the resistance, and you even have the resistance within the bourgeois buildings, and you know, you have things happening occasionally that kind of push this. But then alongside this, we still have, which with worth acknowledging, less funding, less recognition, less canonization in scholarly discourses, although I think this has been changing in scholarship. But you know, so we had practitioners, we still have them, who are going into communities, who are performing for the deprived, who are, but some of it, I'm thinking of let's say, if we took an Indian example, the famous Janam. So how are they going to reach their community? Certainly not on Zoom. You know, so I completely agree. I think when we talk about these Zoom performances, I think we talk about basically some kind of middle class audience that would go to, that has enough money to pay for a ticket at a national. Although to be fair, national offers tickets for £10 for students and on the same day. But you know, it's not, you know, it's not, you don't go to. It's not the theater for the suburbs. It's not, I don't mean middle class suburbs. It's not, but I mean more like estate, more like deprived. So how do you reach the deprived areas? I know, for example, that again, this is pre-pandemic, that for example, the festival Vienna Festwochen, which is which on the one hand has a lot of elitist elements to it, but it was formed as something that to push the idea of an alternative history of Austria, which is more leftist and so on. So now they have their program, their main program, but they also have a lot of things that are happening, a lot of alternative artists, a lot of things that are happening on the outskirts of the city, speaking to the immigrant cultures, for example, speaking to others. So yes, I think we have to find ways, and I think Zoom performances and online is not the only way. It's limited aesthetically and it's limited politically. So we have to get on our feet again. That might be, it could, I don't know, whether that's an installation somewhere or an audio walk, or if we cannot do it, if we cannot bring everybody together very close, put the bodies very close next to each other, it has to be something else. But yeah, this is not reaching always where it has to reach. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the next question kind of seamlessly goes with what we were talking about just now. Shubh Singhal asks, once theater revives back to its old stage form, do you think this online form and medium will still be a part of theater in coming time? What is your view on that?
I think that as with various other historical moments, new forms have arisen from different moments of crisis,
Right.
out of the need to speak about certain things, or out of necessity, or out of lack of some resources. So forms have emerged out of various situations of crisis. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some innovation, some new forms alongside the forms we are using. I think when we go back on stage, we would want to go back on stage. We would want to, use it in whichever form we are using it, whether it's a stage in an institutional theater, whether it's street theater, whether it's something else. But I think that we might see a combination of things, and it might see some new forms coming out. I think I'll be curious to see what comes out of it. I think this is maybe a part that's a bit of a silver lining, really, because whatever new emerges, it's not, once we are able to go fully back, it's not going to cancel what we had.
Yeah.
We can go, we may not go, I mean, since we were with the Greeks, you cannot step in the same river twice, but you can sort of step in a river again. So I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not, I don't see this as a dystopian moment.
Right. Just to think about this, in India, for example, you see digital platforms already changing the way, changing themselves in order to fit in this language of digital performance. For example, there used to be a booking platform called Insider, and now they are taking in a lot of digital performances, and they are kind of changing the format in which they used to sell tickets. Earlier, used to be only a platform where tickets were sold. Do you see such changes in digital platforms in UK as well? Have you noticed such changes where artists may be using such bigger platforms to perform?
I haven't noticed in a sense that there would be an organization using this, but I have seen artists. I don't know if this is actually, yeah, but I've seen artists using, let's say, various digital platforms for some kind of mini performances, for some kind of performances they wouldn't normally do. Often they are homemade performances, or something like that. I've been recently to a book launch that was digital by so we did pay to get in, and we got a book on a discounted price. So it's that sort of. I think artists are using it, but I'm not aware, but doesn't mean that doesn't exist, of a platform that was meant for supplying tickets to now do to now create events, create content. But maybe they do exist. I'm just not informed.
Yeah. I think I have just one last question. We don't really have anything as such. Apujia says, I think we are all trying to grapple through such similar concerns, which is the political within the parameter of the digital performance space. But a related question that I have is, given that we are using platforms such as Zoom, which are definitely owned by corporations, large corporations, right? In India, already there is the Dramatic Performances Act, which came into existence during the colonial period in 1876 and such. And it exists in a few states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, and where you have to submit your script, and there is, it could be that there have been cases where, plays have been censored, or we are regularly told to remove lines or words. I mean, this has happened to us also. It's a common thing that we have also learned a way to work through all these censorship modalities that exist. Now, given that we are using platforms, so now we are not using a public theater anymore. Now we are not using a smaller street space, a space that we can call our own as such, but often we are using a Zoom or a YouTube or a Google Meet or whatever it is. Where do you think the entire discourse of censorship or corporate influence would go from here? Do you have, I mean, did you have any?
Yeah, no, this is a disconcerting aspect. I mean, I think part of me thinks that sometimes you could do things or be subversive within the structures that are not your own. Within the structures that you don't always agree with, up to a point, of course, and that some are slightly more ethical than others, but there is none of them is actually completely fine. What worries me there is that there is a dimension. It still becomes part of this surveillance mechanism, surveillance cultures. Even though this is maybe, I don't know how you configure those things, but I think some of them are configured to be very private, others are less private. But even if you configure something to be private, I'm not sure, because it's part of some mechanism that not all of us understand. So how private it actually is. Private, maybe, that not some other of my friends could go in, but maybe it's not private for whoever sits somewhere in a so I think it's that sort of it's that sort of monitoring. I think what allows is for more monitoring. What allows is for more surveillance. What allows is for that sort of control, for that sort of panopticon, that Foucauldian panopticon has been expanding, and I think this situation in a way has helped it expand even more. So I think even things that are good for us, like track and trace, we all have apps, we are all traceable, we are all, and some of it has its positives, because we might be, but sometimes it's really a very fine line, and very often this fine line is crossed. So I that's why I think this cannot be our only meeting place.
Right.
I think we still have to fight for ways to assembly, to have this, as Pooja said, to have a public, in the way where this public can be to some extent, I don't mean free in the sense of free for all, in the sense of anarchic, but where a public can feel the agency of the space as well. That they have the agency of the space, not just, because on the other hand, I think if this can reach more people, if this can, if we can go, if these are platforms that might go beyond preaching to the converted, but again, you through this, you speak to a certain audiences, and you for various reasons you exclude other audiences as well. So yeah, it is limiting and it's problematic. I think we can be subversive within, but I think there is a fine line, and I think we have to watch it carefully, how we, to what extent we swim into it.
Yes, absolutely. Sylvia, are you up for taking one last question? This is from an audience member, and then we close. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So, Devendranath asks, do the pandemic create resistance for the common people to perform their basic expressions? So, are people unable to really express themselves? I think that's what he's asking. Do the pandemic create resistance for the common people, stop the common people to perform their basic expressions? Are they unable to perform because of the pandemic?
Are they stopping them from performing their basic expressions?
Yes.
I think it's a very interesting question, and I think it might be a common context-specific question as well.
Right.
I think I think in some ways, In many ways, I would say yes, because from it links to the question of technology. I mean, if technology is important to perform this, even we are all in the education system, and we talked before we went live, and it's a big question for you as it is for us here. How do you make sure that all the students can access what we have, and what they need to have to do this? So it's this. So it's this element. And then I also think that if we think of some forms that are communal or indigenous or traditional, or something that certain communities are relying on in terms of their, not only their identity, but also their expressions of resistance, of asserting their voices and so on, if the public spaces are not available, and yes, there is a good rationale for them not to be available, but again, this fine line between protection and abuse of power is always in this situation very thin. Then where do they voice their grievances? How do they voice their grievances? And sometimes you don't always voice their grievances to protest. Sometimes, very often actually, we voice our grievances to cultural forums. And so if that is limited, if the technology is not available, or if some other resources are not available, then how do you do that? Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. And as it does in other areas when it comes to because it has to do with privilege, and this whole situation is easier from some than for others, throughout, and some are in more precarious situations than others, and what it has exposed is what we have known all along, but
divisions in society. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's these inequalities which actually are really, they're becoming really dramatic in some moments. They're becoming really sort of, it's not just yes, it's not about stating the fact of it, but it's really there is a devastating aspect to it. So yeah, I think broadly speaking, my answer would be yes to this.
Yeah, the privileges of work from home, which is only available to a few. So, artistic expressions, obviously, like you said, is something that get restricted, given that on the one hand, you realize that you have to be at home, but on the other, there is no option but to go out, in some countries like ours.
Yeah, it's a bit on a tangent, but I think it relates, thinking of the Oedipus piece and the New Yorker article, this author of the article, thinking of the fact that theaters were not closed there, and it's really 15,000 people these theaters could house at the moment, at one time, and also social distancing. So one of the questions the author asked, were theater makers key workers in ancient Athens? So and it's a good, I mean, it's a good question, is it, because I think these are important things to make what we do, or not only what the different makers do. Sometimes it is a way of making sense of reality, but also maintaining that sort of criticality, maintaining some kind of forms of resistance as well. So
yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sylvia, for your time. I think on that note, we'll end our discussion today. And really, I mean, we have been trying to get speakers and using this opportunity of accessing scholars from all over the world. We did a session earlier last month, I think, with Erin, me, and this time with you. And it has been wonderful. And I think the students have been enjoying this very much. And a number of artists from across India and elsewhere have also joined. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real honor, and hopefully we'll be back on stages in no time.
Yes, and I hope to see you in real time and real space somewhere soon.
That would be great. Yes, this should not be the replacement for the here and now, for the proper assembly. Yes. All right. Good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello. Yeah, Mustafa, can you just let me open my video?